your name, your lips speak it. And yet, the name does not belong to the atoms and molecules in the lips that utter the syllables. The name has meaning only to you. Within your body, you cannot put your finger upon your own identity. If you could travel within your body, you could not find where your identity resides. Yet you say, "This is my body," and "This is my name." The soul is not frightened for its identity. It is sure of itself. It ever seeks. It is not afraid of being overwhelmed by experience or perception. If you had a more thorough understanding of the nature of identity, you would not, for example, fear telepathy. For behind this concern is the worry that your identity will be swept away by the suggestions or thoughts of others. It seems to you that you have only one form, the physical one that you perceive, and no other. It also seems that your form can only be in one place at one time. You have indeed other forms that you do not perceive, and you also create various kinds of forms for various purposes, although you do not perceive these physically either. You are presently focused not only in your physical body, but within a particular frequency of events that you interpret as time. Other historical periods exist simultaneously in forms quite as valid, and other reincarnational selves. Again, you simply are not tuned to those frequencies. You can know what happened in the past and have histories because, according to the rules of the game that you accepted, you believe that the past, but not the future, can be perceived. You could have histories of the future in the present if the rules of the game were different. In other levels of reality, the rules of the game change. After death, in your terms, you are quite free perceptively. The future appears as clearly as the past. The so-called stream of consciousness is simply that, one small stream of thoughts, images, and impressions, part of a much deeper river of consciousness that represents our own far greater existence and experience. You spend all your time examining this one small stream so that you become hypnotized by its flow and entranced by its motion. Simultaneously, these other streams of perception and consciousness go by without your notice, yet they are very much a part of you. They represent quite valid aspects, events, actions, and emotions with which you are also involved in other layers of reality. You are as actively and vividly concerned in these realities as you are in the one in which your main attention is now focused. Often you tune into these other streams of consciousness without realizing you've done so. For again, they are a part of the same river of your identity. All are therefore connected. Any creative work involves you in a cooperative process in which you learn to dip into these other streams of consciousness. You come up with a perception that has far more dimensions than one arising from the one narrow, usual stream of consciousness that you know. Great creativity is then multidimensional for this reason. Its origin is not from one reality, but from many, and it is tinged with the multiplicity of that origin. Great creativity always seems greater than its pure physical dimension and reality. By contrast with the so-called usual, it appears almost as an intrusion. It takes the breath away. Such creativity automatically reminds each man of his own multidimensional reality. The words, "know thyself," therefore, mean far more than most people ever suppose. In moments of solitude, you may become aware of some of these other streams of consciousness. These other existences of yours go on quite merrily, whether you are waking or sleeping, but while you are awake, ordinarily you block them out. In the dream state, you are much more aware of them, although there is a final process of dreaming that often masks intense psychological and psychic experience. Unfortunately, what you usually recall is this final dream version. Some dreams themselves do take place in psychic or mental areas connected with your daily activities, but in the very deep reaches of sleep experience, those, incidentally, not yet touched upon by scientists in so-called dream laboratories, you are in communication with other portions of your own identity and with the other realities in which they exist. Some waking states, of course, come very close to sleep states. These blend one into the other so that the rhythm often goes unnoticed. These gradations of consciousness are accompanied by changes in the physical organism. In the more sluggish periods of waking consciousness, there is a lack of concentration, a cutting off of stimuli to...
And if theta has another value, theta sub 2, then you have to be careful. Okay. Yeah. So you have to make sure that when you multiply those matrices, when you are going to have a matrix that belongs to your set. So you have to be very careful.
It does satisfy the condition.
No, well, I guess it will be a group, not a group, because your parameter has to be continuous. Yes, the parameter.
The second question is, you say the Lie algebra is a mathematical structure that underlies the infinitesimal group structure.
Yeah. I'm going to go through. I'm going to in more detail. Yes.
The last question is what example of this generator that you? What were you trying to?
Okay, this is the generator that generates infinitesimal translations along one axis. Okay. Yes. For example, here in the blackboard, imagine I have the z-axis and have an angle. In that case, I write theta sub 3 because I'm specifying the third axis. But imagine if I perform a rotation around one axis only. So the generator of those rotations around this axis will be given by
rotations, not
yeah. No, rotations. Yeah. Is this clear? Yeah. Is this clear? Okay. Let me. Okay. Is this what I was? This is back. Okay. Okay. What do I mean by exponentiation of a Lie algebra element? Here, for example. Just wait for. I'm ready to write here. You know. Yes. So here, let's suppose here I have the element of my group, which is a 2 by 2 matrix, and I want to rewrite this as the exponentiation of I theta x. The reason I write I here is because if x is Hermitian, if I have a Hermitian generator, when I multiply by I, the square root of -1, I will obtain an anti-Hermitian generator. You see, physicists are obsessed with working with Hermitian generators. Mathematicians don't like to work with Hermitian generators. They work with anti-Hermitian generators. The reason they do that is because they don't like to write the I everywhere, the imaginary root. It appears everywhere. Mathematicians don't like that. So a mathematician will eliminate the I, and X will be an anti-Hermitian generator as opposed to a Hermitian generator. I will go into more detail later, you know. But essentially, when you remember Euler's formula, when you exponentiate Euler's formula, you're going to have the cosine of theta times 1. This 1 in boldface is the identity element. It's the unit element, you know, of your group. It's just the diagonal matrix with 1, 1, 1, 1 along the diagonal. And the reason you get the sign, remember Euler's formula? When you perform a Taylor series of e to the I theta, you perform a Taylor series expansion. The even powers of the angle is going to give you the cosine theta. The odd powers of the angle, theta, theta cubed, theta to the 5, and so forth, are going to give you the sine expansion. The even are going to give you the cosine expansion. So when you expand this Taylor expansion, you can expand this in Taylor series, and you're going to have powers of x squared, x cubed. And by that I mean the products of your matrix. You take the square of your matrix, the cube of your matrix, the fourth power of your matrix, and so forth. And when you combine all the terms together, the even powers will coalesce and will give you cosine theta times the identity element. And the odd powers of the angle will give you sine theta times the x. Remember, x was my matrix here. Okay?
So the choice of x was important because you want that to generate the rotation group such that...
Yes, I want this choice of x such that when I exponentiate the x, will reproduce this matrix. Okay?
So I was wondering why you chose that.
Yes. Yes. So of course, when I exponentiate that, so when I write 1 here, then this is why I have cosine theta, and then when I have a sine theta here, when I chose my X to be, let me just, I have to go back. When I chose this X like this, notice the anti-symmetry here. I have a +1 and a -1 here. So when I write them like this, yes.
You could say, what's your denomination? Baptist, Methodist, Catholic, Presbyterian, Episcopalian, Quaker, etc., 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 you see. But strictly speaking, you could say, what's your denomination? Baptist, Methodist, Catholic, Presbyterian, Episcopalian, Quaker, etc., 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 you see. But strictly speaking, a Vanaprastha, a Shramana, has no label. He is an unlabeled bottle. So, in the time when the Buddha lived, about 600 BC, the Hindu system had become somewhat decadent. It isn't altogether clear what had happened, but it is certain that it did seem in some way to be in need of reform. And so, there were many reasons for this. And the Buddha, as a young man, being basically troubled by the great problems that we're all troubled with, the problem of suffering, and the problem of what all this universe is about, he endeavored to follow the methods that were then being used by people who were shramanas or vanaprasthas, forest dwellers. And at that time, it's very apparent that the main method that these people were using was an ascetic discipline. Starvation, very arduous meditation practices, probably self-flagellation, and things of that kind. And it's said that you could say, what's your denomination? You could say, what's your denomination? Baptist, Methodist, Catholic, Presbyterian, Episcopalian, Quaker, etc., 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 you see. But strictly speaking, a Vanaprastha